We are here today to talk about funding education for the long run. And you can ask me to introduce myself. I work for the Economic Opportunity Institute. I'm the policy director there and have been there for about 9 years. I'm a former PTA member from, I guess, about 1990 until 4 years ago. I was a member of the PTA in Seattle Public Schools where my kids went to school, but my youngest child is graduating from college this year, so I've moved on. I'm about to move on to a whole new phase of life here. The Economic Opportunity Institute is a nonprofit organization based in Washington State and really focused on trying to build the kind of economy that will build opportunity and prosperity for everyone. We work on issues like state tax policy, which is what we'll be focusing on mainly today, but also issues like early learning and care, public education, paid family leave and paid sick days, which has become suddenly very hot topic with all of this that's going on. We do a lot of research about the state economy and whatnot. You have some handouts on state tax policy. I brought a few other samples of things we do. Brief on full-day kindergarten and why that's important that we did a couple of years ago. This is just hot off the press, finished yesterday afternoon, on who can stay home with the flu, about who does get paid sick days and who doesn't get paid sick leave, and why it might be a good idea if we're all being told to stay home and keep our kids home from school that everybody, in fact, have access to paid sick days. A report we did this year on Washington's working women, not equal yet, sadly. And an annual report we do on the state of working Washington, looking at how the economy is affecting working families. This comes out in September, so it's pretty out of date now in terms of what's happened since last September in the economy. But it is something that we do annually. And I have a few copies of these. If you'd like to, you can take these. Anyone who gets here first can take one of these after the class is over. And they're also all posted on our website. So you're welcome to download those, or you can email me and I can send you our copies. I always like to start out talking about tax policy. Oh, first, before I start, I think Russ Lidman did a session this morning on the state tax structure. How many of you were in that? Quite a few. And last fall at the Legislative Assembly, I did a presentation for you. You at that one? A few. Okay, so this is going to be geared to all of you, hopefully. For some of you, you will have heard some of this before, but it doesn't hurt a little bit, so we all are on the same page. So I always like to start with why we have taxes. And we have taxes because there are some things we can do together collectively that we simply can't do on our own, that individuals and the private market simply cannot accomplish by themselves. So in the words of the U.S. Constitution, we have government and therefore taxes in order to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. And of course, in the Washington State Constitution, it states that the paramount duty of the state of Washington is to provide an ample provision for the education of all children residing in its borders, without distinction or preference on account of race, color, caste, or sex, which is pretty remarkable language to have included in a 19th century document. There's been a lot in the news over the last few months about the state budget shortfall, so I'm sure you all heard about that, and you've probably been talking about it among yourselves also. We started out with about a $9 billion budget shortfall between the shortfall for the current biennium that we're in that goes through the end of this June, and then there's about $1.2 billion shortfall for this biennium, and then the rest of that $9 billion from the shortfall projected for next biennium, from the amount that would be needed in order to just maintain the current level of services, taking into account the increased number of kids in schools, the increased number of other populations, the increased general population, inflation, and whatnot. And as you can see, the amount that was being expected to be taken in just from state tax revenue was actually leveled from one biennium to the next, which is a pretty unusual situation with population growth and general growth of the economy. Usually from year to year we have a little bit of natural coming in, but because of the collapse of consumer spending and the collapse of the housing market and everything else that is happening this year. I tried to pull together what the state actually did in education spending. So they finished up the budget last Sunday to today. It was a little hard to pull together some of these numbers, but I think this is pretty generally accurate. So about half of the state general fund budget goes to public education, K through 12 education. And some of that, most of that is state funds. There's some federal and other funds, particularly this year with some of the federal stimulus money that came in specifically for education. But in order to maintain level of funding, given the increasing number of students and other inflationary issues, they ended up cutting about $1.8 billion over the biennium from K-12 education. And that was about equally divided between the compensation cuts, including the COLAs that were approved by the voters several years ago, the 728 money, the student achievement money, and then other kinds of cuts that were made in non-basic education kinds of programs. The fact of the matter is, though, as much as the recession has really been the main topic of conversation over the last few months, it's not really all about the recession. Even when our economy recovers, which it will do, if not this year, then in the next year or two, we're still going to be facing a problem. Washington has a serious structural deficit, and as you can see, this goes from the first column there is 1991-92 school year, then the 1997-98 school year, the 2005-2006 school year. It shows two different measures of K-12 education, comparing where Washington ranks to the other states in the United States. And as you can see, we were about in the middle in 1991 in terms of funding per $1,000 of personal income. So that's a way to measure, relative to our wealth. We're actually a relatively well-to-do state compared to some of the more rural states or southern states. So compared to our overall income, we were about in the middle in terms of education funding back in 1991. In terms of per pupil funding, we were pretty good, about 17th in per pupil funding. But you can see in both of those measures, we've fallen substantially. So we're at a level that I think none of us would really say is the proper level for Washington compared to the other states. The structural deficit is because our tax base is shrinking. Yes, go ahead.
Can you explain why we've fallen? Is it because the revenues costs have increased and the amount of money stayed the same? Is it because costs have increased and we've decreased the amount of money?
It's because other states have been, and I'm about to go into what some of the background to why we've fallen so much.
Okay.
I mean, it's of course there's lots of things, but the sort of central reason is about what I'm about to cover now. And that really has to do with our structural deficit. The fact that our tax base is shrinking as a part of the overall economy, the things that we tax in our economy, that part of the economy isn't growing at the same rate as the whole economy is growing. And at the same time, our need for public investments have been going up. And we'll go into this in a little more detail now. Our basic tax structure that we have here in Washington State was adopted in the 1930s. In 1935 was when the sales tax came into place, the business and occupation tax, which is the main business tax we have, was also established in 1935. We've had the property tax since territorial based. But those three taxes really form the base of our revenue stream in Washington State. But our economy has changed substantially since then. In the mid-20th century, about 12% of jobs were in agriculture, about a quarter of jobs were in manufacturing. Those have both gone down substantially. In the 1930s and 40s, my grandfather was able to support his family of 6, having dropped out of school at the age of 13 when his father died. And on one income, he could support his family of 6. That's something that we don't expect very many families to live on one income, let alone the income of someone who left school at the age of 13. Today, we expect everyone to graduate from high school and a substantial number to go to community college or 4-year